Welcome to Scrutinize My System. This episode will be looking into the mess that surrounded macOS 2, or the second incarnation of the Macintosh system software. The numbering system will not be officially assigned by Apple until version 5, so for version 1 through 4, we will rely on the operating system itself for the version number. With that said, let's take a look at macOS 2. In 1983, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak were still young and too inexperienced at running a company of their own. They relied heavily on hired help to manage the business decisions and financial planning, including for the position of CEO of their own company. The first CEO of the company, Michael Scott, didn't work out so well. He fired people just because he thought the company wasn't fun anymore. The second CEO, Mike Markula, who also happened to be the one to recommend the first CEO, would only hold the title for 3 years before stepping down for the third CEO. Steve Jobs would be the one to pick the next CEO, and he had his eyes set on John Sculley. John at the time was the CEO of PepsiCo, the soda company. He was known for having an excellent record in marketing, and Steve wanted him to come over to help push the computer world forward. Steve Jobs will come to regret this. Almost immediately there were arguments, there were fights, there were conspiracies to overthrow Steve Jobs himself. Steve Jobs kept pushing for the Macintosh while John Sculley would keep pushing for the already obsolete Apple II, both sides with good reasons. In 1985, the Macintosh performed much worse than they expected in sales. Talk of nullifying Steve Jobs' authority circulated, and ultimately would result in Jobs severing ties with his own company, just in time to release the second incarnation of the Macintosh's operating system, and just in time to introduce more key features that would survive the test of time. John Sculley had unintentionally taken over Apple, but was free to do as he pleased.
Alright, so let's go ahead and demonstrate the operating systems that did come out about this time. We'll start with System 2.0. There was a System 2.1, and I was really debating on if I should demonstrate it in this episode or the next episode, because in my opinion, I think it should be considered System Software 3. But just because it's 2, we're going to demonstrate it in this episode as well. So there is a major difference in between System 2.0 and 2.1, and we'll talk about that as we load them up. So let's start with System 2.0. Now you'll notice right off the bat, the interface looks almost exactly the same. The disk and the trash can have almost exact same icons. The same font and everything is at the top. Desktop's background's almost exactly the same, and on the surface, it seems like not much has changed between System 2.0 and System 1, but I'll show you a couple different changes that have happened. One, there is a shutdown option on here, so this would actually provide a soft shutdown for the machine, although really it just resets it because the machine itself wasn't really capable of doing like a soft shutdown. Everything else is pretty similar. They went back to like a more boring font to the Macintosh Finder information on here. This says version 4.1. We know the system here is version 2.0. This is copyrighted in 1985, and this one was more commercially available. This is what they shipped the machines with, and most of this has been unchanged regarding all the features and everything. This is still the same. The calculator is still the same. I'm just going to go down the list and show you. Control panel is the same. There is this, though, the choose printer. And about this time, this is when Apple Talk was starting to become released. So they wanted everybody to have something that they were able to connect their computers, because I guess at the time they were still fighting over the standard for Ethernet. Ethernet was around, but nobody really knew what the standard was at the time, so they wanted something that the companies could put out at the time that they could rely on. So the idea behind Apple Talk was that they had something out of the box that all the computers can plug into. Keycaps is unchanged. Notepad The font's changed a little bit, which I think you can change back. Maybe. But that goes unchanged. The puzzle, unchanged. Scrapbook. Now, something I want to point out in the scrapbook, even though functionally it's almost the same, you'll notice that the font's a little bit different. And you got the Macintosh logo, which is current as of System 2. But the scrapbook starts having more business-oriented copy and paste stuff. And you'll notice at the time when this came out, which I think was April 1985, if I'm looking at the right date, the operating system was almost immediately targeted towards businesses because, one, they were the ones that had the money, and two, Apple quickly realized, well, I should say John Sculley quickly realized that their bigger market is going to be businesses. So instead of making this thing look all playful and everything like Steve Jobs originally wanted, John Sculley was telling people, hey, we should probably start focusing this more on businesses, even though John Sculley ultimately wanted to push the Apple II because that was what was making the most money at the time. So, regarding that, there's not really much on the surface that's changed itself. You still got the font DA movie. You still got... This changed a little bit. You got the 128K disk copy. And then the other thing I wanted to demonstrate, we can try it now. Let me go ahead and scrap this first. But with this one, there is an option to take a screenshot now. And this actually lasts all the way up until, as of recording this episode, I think macOS Catalina is the latest. Which this actually is capable, you're actually capable of doing the same thing on Catalina. So what you want to do is you want to hold Command, Shift, and 3. Let's see if it'll work in the virtual machine. Command, Shift, and 3. That was not it. There it is. Okay. So Command Shift and 3 will take a picture of essentially everything that's on your desktop. I wish I had something to open this. I don't think I could just throw this on the scrapbook, can I? No, that's not going to work. No, that didn't work. But ideally, Command Shift and 3 would give you a screenshot of the desktop, and you can pretty much send that to somebody. It's a screenshot. There's all kinds of things you can do with it. So that is System Software 2.0, excuse me. The Finder version is 4.1 in this edition. And let's go ahead and switch this over to the next one, 2.1. Now I do have to say well, I'll tell you when we get it booted up. Now, as this thing is loading, I put in 2 disks in here. One is going to be the hard drive tester, which I found out System Software 2.1 was specifically designed to have a hard drive tester because at the time they were getting ready to release the HD20, which would have been a hard drive for all the Macs that was long overdue. So System Software 2.1 technically was not really used mainstream for a whole lot besides, well, testing hard drives. I unfortunately am not able to demonstrate a hard drive on this virtual machine because they all come out as floppy disks for some reason. On this one, it says for the Macintosh Finder, this is version 5. Now, keep in mind, this is System Software 2.1. And this was initially developed to test hard drives. So most of this is going to be unchanged. You still got the timer. You still got a calculator. Pretty much the same thing that was in the last thing, so there's not a whole lot that has changed here. Keycaps, I'm just going to go through the list just so you can see everything. Yeah, that's still the same. Puzzle, not much has changed. Scrapbook, it's the exact same scrapbook with the exact same icons, so nothing has changed there. But what I do want to demonstrate is that with System Software 2.1, and it becomes more mainstream in System Software 3, is that there's a new system called the hierarchical file system for the file directories. And the major difference between the original one, which was the Macintosh file system, and the hierarchical file system is that the hierarchical file system is an actual directory. You can have actual directories, whereas the Macintosh file system, everything is just kind of thrown in together. Let me go ahead and demonstrate this. So, on this one here, if I was to create a folder, let's go ahead and, well, first off, I got to delete this one. Let's go ahead and name this test. Now for test, this folder is in the root directory. Well, let's say we make another folder. Now keep in mind, this folder, according to what is on the screen, is not going to be in the same directory as this, but that's assuming it is a directory. Technically, in the Macintosh file system, most programs won't even recognize these folders. They just assume everything is thrown in the root directory. And because of that, we are not able to have a folder with the same name inside a different folder on the same disk, because technically everything's showing up as on the same drive. So the Macintosh file system prevents you from actually having real directories, whereas the hierarchical file system lets demonstrate that. So we get a folder named test. Let's go ahead and make another one in here that says test. And it lets us do it. It even lets us open it up. And I can drag this folder. I can throw it on the desktop. Actually, no, I can't, because the desktop's running off the Macintosh file system disk. So, but with the hierarchical file system, you're now able to have real directories instead of just fake folders like what they have on the Macintosh file system. So that's the major difference between the two. Not much else has really changed between the System Software 2.0 and 2.1, but this is going to be huge in the future episodes. And you'll notice in 3.0 that everything is going to start going towards the hierarchical file system from this point until they start replacing it with the HFS Plus, or hierarchical file system plus file system. Alright, if you like this episode, please subscribe. I got more videos on the way. So stay tuned for more episodes of Scrutinize My System. We got Windows, we got Apple coming. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe.